Have you ever noticed that the more someone ignores us, the more our mind begins to obsess over them? It's as though the human heart, when denied, begins to beat louder in pursuit of what it cannot reach. This paradox, desiring those who turn away, is one of the strangest and yet most consistent truths of human attraction. And nowhere is this more visible than in the dance between men and women. Women, in particular, often find themselves drawn almost magnetically to men who seem to withhold attention, affection, or validation. Why? Why would anyone want what resists them? Why do we chase silence when kindness might be sitting right in front of us? To answer this, we must step into the deep waters of psychology, philosophy, and human instinct. Imagine a woman who walks into a room filled with men. Some smile immediately, eager to please, eager to make conversation. Another avoids eye contact, barely acknowledges her presence, perhaps even appears disinterested. The irony? Her attention often drifts not to the men who openly court her, but to the one who acts as though she doesn't exist. The neglected glance becomes irresistible. The ignored presence becomes magnetic. Psychologists call this the scarcity effect. When something is less available, its perceived value skyrockets. Attention functions like currency in the economy of relationships. A man who gives it freely to everyone seems to hold something cheap, but a man who withholds, who rations his gaze and his time, suddenly creates the illusion of worth. If his attention is scarce, it must be valuable. And so, the very act of ignoring transforms him into a treasure, one that must be unlocked, one that must be pursued. But philosophy offers an even deeper layer. The French philosopher Sartre once wrote about the agony of the other, the way our sense of self is constantly tied to how others see us. When someone acknowledges us, they confirm our existence. But when someone refuses, when they withhold recognition, it shakes us at the core. It forces us to question, am I not enough? Am I not worthy? Why do they not see me? And in that questioning, desire is born. We do not crave what we already have. We crave what we cannot fully possess. From an evolutionary standpoint, the man who ignores, the one who doesn't beg for attention, signals something primal, abundance of choice. If he can afford to ignore her, perhaps it means others are already chasing him. If others are chasing him, he must have value, whether in status, strength, or hidden qualities. The ignoring man, without saying a word, communicates high worth. He doesn't need to chase because he is already chased. And this, paradoxically, makes him even more desirable. But there's another, more delicate truth hidden here. Women often desire the man who ignores them, not because of who he is, but because of what his indifference awakens within them. His silence, his distance, becomes a mirror. It reflects back their own insecurities, their own hunger for validation. And instead of questioning why they desire him, they question why he does not desire them. That question burns. That question becomes obsession. And obsession, as history shows, is often mistaken for love. The ancient Stoics reminded us that desire is often nothing more than projection. We project value onto the object of our longing, even if that object does not truly possess it. The ignored woman begins to weave stories. Perhaps he is mysterious. Perhaps he is deep. Perhaps he sees something the others cannot. In truth, he may simply be detached, disinterested, or even emotionally unavailable. But desire does not care for reality. It cares only for the dream. And so, the ignored man becomes a canvas on which the woman paints all her fantasies. Imagine walking into a lavish banquet hall. On one side, there are mountains of food, fruits, bread, desserts stacked high and abundant. People pass by casually, even wastefully, because they know there is more than enough. On the far corner, however, there's a single golden plate with only a few rare delicacies. Suddenly, everyone's attention shifts. It's not the mountain of food that captures the imagination, but the scarce, almost unreachable dish. Why? Because the human brain has been wired over centuries of survival to chase what is rare, what is limited, what may be gone tomorrow. This is the psychology of scarcity. And in relationships, attention is that golden plate. The man who freely gives his attention, complimenting, texting constantly, showing up at every moment, becomes like the overflowing banquet table. He is abundant, accessible, predictable. But the man who withholds, who ignores, who does not place himself easily within reach, becomes rare. And the rare, in the human mind, equals valuable. Scarcity is not just a psychological bias, it is a survival mechanism. For most of human history, resources were limited. Those who could identify and secure scarce resources lived while others perished. That survival instinct still operates in modern minds, even in matters of romance. A man who ignores, therefore, unconsciously triggers the same alert system that once told our ancestors, "This is rare. This must be pursued. If you lose it, you may never find it again." But scarcity is only half the story. The other half is power. To ignore someone is to hold power over them. Attention is one of the deepest currencies of human interaction. When someone refuses to give you their attention, they are essentially withholding the very recognition that validates your existence. And in that withholding, they place themselves above you. They are the chooser, while you are the seeker. In psychology, this is tied to intermittent reinforcement, a principle discovered through behavioral experiments. Imagine a slot machine. If every time you pulled the lever, you got a reward, it would quickly lose its thrill. But if the reward comes only sometimes, unpredictably, the game becomes addictive. The man who ignores does not give consistent attention. Perhaps he looks once, then withdraws. Perhaps he texts occasionally, then disappears. This unpredictability triggers the same addictive cycle in the brain. Women, like anyone exposed to intermittent reinforcement, can become hooked not on the man himself, but on the unpredictable possibility of his attention. This is why men who are indifferent often become more desirable than men who are always available. The ignored woman finds herself thinking, maybe tomorrow he will notice me. Maybe if I try harder, he will finally respond. The absence of certainty fuels obsession. And obsession, once again, is mistaken for desire. From a philosophical standpoint, ignoring is an assertion of freedom. Existentialist thinkers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche remind us that freedom often manifests as detachment from the demands of others. The man who ignores communicates, consciously or not, that he is not bound by anyone's expectations. He does not need to respond. He does not need to please. And in a world where so many men are desperate to win favor, the one who stands apart seems powerful, almost untouchable. Power and scarcity intertwine here like two strands of the same rope. Scarcity elevates value. Power elevates status. Together, they create the illusion of superiority. The ignored woman does not just see a man. She sees a challenge, a gatekeeper of worth, someone whose recognition would feel like winning a prize, and so her desire intensifies. But here lies the darker truth. Scarcity and power can create illusions that blind us. The ignored man may not be powerful in reality. He may not be rare in virtue or in depth. He may simply be detached, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. Yet, the woman interprets his lack of attention as proof of value. She projects meaning onto his silence. His indifference becomes a mask of strength, when in fact, it might be weakness, avoidance, or even apathy. Psychology has a name for this projection, the halo effect. When we see one trait we perceive as valuable, in this case scarcity of attention, we begin to assume other traits must also be present. If he ignores, he must be confident. If he ignores, he must be desired by others. If he ignores, he must be successful. The reality may be far less glamorous, but desire thrives on illusion, not truth. Consider the modern dating world. Social media, dating apps, constant notifications. Attention has become more abundant than ever. A single swipe, a single message, and someone can shower you with compliments. In this abundance, attention has been devalued. Women know that men can copy-paste 100 messages a day. They know that compliments can be given, not because they are special, but because they are simply available. In this noisy marketplace, the man who ignores becomes the rare voice of silence. And silence, ironically, speaks louder than words. Silence says, I am not desperate. Silence says, I am not chasing. Silence says, I do not need you to complete me. And whether true or not, these messages resonate. They suggest independence, self-sufficiency, qualities historically tied to strength and survival. Desire, as Plato argued in his dialogues, is always a longing for what we lack. We do not desire what we already have in abundance. We desire what we feel deprived of. And in the presence of an ignoring man, a woman feels deprived of the simplest, yet most essential human need, recognition. She desires not him, but the filling of that void. She desires not his soul, but the power he holds by refusing to acknowledge hers. This is the cruel paradox. The very act of being ignored convinces the mind that the one ignoring is worth chasing. The scarcity of his attention magnifies his value, and the power he holds in withholding makes him seem untouchable. Women chase men who ignore them, not because those men are inherently superior, but because scarcity and power distort perception. Scarcity makes the heart believe something is valuable. Power makes the mind believe something is desirable. Together, they create an illusion strong enough to override reason.